"What did you think, Mom? That I was going to give you the house?" My son Julian's voice echoed in the lawyer's office with a tone I had never heard from him. It was not just mockery. It was pure contempt. We were sitting around that dark wood table, and he looked at me as if I were a stranger, as if I had not spent 35 years taking care of him, giving him everything I had. He let out a small laugh. "Short, dry, full of poison. Keep the old, rusty car, Mom. At least you can sell it for scrap." Mr. Wallace cleared his throat uncomfortably, shuffling the will's papers on his desk. I kept my gaze fixed on my son. I said nothing, not a single word. I just watched him. I saw how his eyes shone with satisfaction, how he smiled, thinking he had won, that I had lost, that he had finally gotten rid of me. My husband had passed away just 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks in which the grief still woke me up at midnight. 3 weeks in which I still made coffee for 2 people out of habit. And there was my only son, the boy I had held in my arms, mocking me at the moment I felt most vulnerable. The lawyer continued reading the will in a professional voice, trying to ignore the tension that filled every corner of that office. For Julian Anderson, the main house located on Maple Avenue, that house where I had lived for over 30 years, where I had raised that boy, who now looked at me with coldness, where I had cooked thousands of meals, where I had cleaned, decorated, painted every wall with my own hands. He also inherited the savings accounts. 2 bank accounts that totaled almost $120,000, money that my husband and I had saved for decades, sacrificing vacations, buying clothes from thrift stores, saving every penny we could. And for Helen Anderson, the lawyer continued, not looking me in the eyes, the 1998 Chevrolet vehicle. That car was over 25 years old. The paint was worn down by the Sunday. The engine made strange noises every time you started it. The seats were torn. It smelled like mildew. It barely ran. It was literally a piece of old metal that almost no one wanted to drive anymore. Julian laughed again, louder this time. "See, Mom? Dad knew who really deserved everything. I am the one who is going to continue this family's legacy. You were just, well, you know, the one who was there, nothing more." I felt something inside me break. It was not my heart. It was something deeper. It was the image I had of my son, the illusion that somewhere inside that man, the child I had loved, still existed. But no, that child did not exist anymore. Maybe he never really existed. Mr. Wallace coughed and gathered the papers. "Well, this concludes the reading of the will. If you have any questions, you can contact me at my office during the next week." Julian stood up immediately, took his copy of the will, and shot me one last look. A look that said everything. That said I did not matter anymore, that my time was over, that now he was the owner of everything, and I was just an inconvenient memory that would soon disappear. "See you, Mom. Or maybe not. Anyway, I guess you are going to have to find somewhere to live now, right? The house is mine, legally, so I hope you start packing your things soon." He left without waiting for an answer, without a hug, without a word of comfort. He just left, closing the door with a sharp slam that made the pictures on the wall tremble. I stayed seated in that chair, looking at the lawyer who avoided my gaze. He knew what had just happened was cruel, unjust, but he said nothing. It was his job to read the will, not to judge it. "Mrs. Anderson," he finally said in a soft voice, "I am very sorry about all this. If you need time to process, or if you have legal questions, I am at your disposal." I nodded silently. I still could not find the words. I still had not fully processed what had happened. My husband had left me almost nothing, and my son had humiliated me in front of a stranger. He had treated me as if I were an obstacle, as if my existence were a problem that had finally been solved. But then I remembered something. I reached into my purse, an old worn-out leather purse I had bought more than 10 years ago. I took out a white envelope, thick, heavy, carefully sealed. Mr. Wallace looked at me with curiosity. "What is that, Mrs. Anderson?" I placed it on the table, slowly, calmly. My hand was not shaking anymore. Suddenly, I felt something new growing inside me. It was not anger. It was not pain. It was clarity. It was strength. It was the certainty that this was not going to end the way my son thought. This, I said finally, my voice firm, is something Julian needs to see. Something that is going to change everything that just happened here. The lawyer frowned. I kept my gaze fixed on that envelope. I knew what it contained. I had saved it for years, waiting, doubting, wondering if I would ever have to use it. And now, after what I had just experienced, after that humiliation, after that mocking laughter, I no longer had any doubts. My son thought he had won. He thought I was weak, that I was going to accept everything in silence, that I was going to disappear without making a sound. But he was wrong, because I had spent 60 years in this world learning to survive. And if I had learned anything, it was that silence is not always weakness. Sometimes, silence is just the calm before the truth. I left that office with the envelope, still tucked in my purse. It was not the time to open it. Not yet. First, I needed to remember. I needed to understand how I had gotten here, how my own son had become a stranger who looked at me with contempt. I walked through the streets of my city, feeling the weight of the years on my shoulders. The afternoon sun was hot, but I barely felt it. My mind was somewhere else. In another time, reviewing every moment, every sign I had ignored, every time I preferred to believe that everything was fine when it clearly was not. The first time I felt something was wrong was 3 years ago. It was my 57th birthday. I had prepared a special dinner, nothing elaborate, just roast chicken with potatoes, a fresh salad, and a chocolate cake I had baked in the morning. Julian had promised to come. He had told me on the phone 2 days before. "Of course I'll be there, Mom. I'll be there at 7 o'clock. Do not worry." I set the table with the tablecloth we only used on special occasions. I took out the good plates. I even bought fresh flowers for the centerpiece. My husband was there, sitting and reading the newspaper, waiting with me. 7 o'clock passed. Then 7:30, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. The chicken got cold. The potatoes turned hard. The cake sat untouched on the counter. At 10 o'clock at night, I received a text message. Short, cold. "Sorry, Mom. Something came up at work. I'll see you next week." My husband looked at me with pity. He said nothing. He just squeezed my hand and helped me put the food away in the refrigerator. That night I cried in the shower so he would not hear me. I told myself it was true, that it had been work, that my son was busy building his career, that I should be understanding. But next week never came. Months passed before I saw him again. The second time was worse. My husband had to have heart surgery. Nothing too serious, but at his age, any operation was a risk. I called Julian 3 days before to let him know. I explained everything. I told him the doctor recommended that the family be present. "Your dad needs you," I told him. "It would be good to have your support." "Sure, Mom. I'll be there. Count on it." The day of the surgery, I arrived at the hospital at 5 in the morning. I sat in that cold waiting room, filled with white light and the smell of disinfectant. Other families were there too. I saw wives accompanied by their children. I saw elderly people surrounded by grandchildren. I saw people who were not alone. I waited for 4 hours. The surgery went well, thank God. When the doctor came out to give me the news, I looked toward the door, expecting to see Julian running in, apologizing for being late. But he did not come. Not that day, nor the next. Not when my husband woke up from the anesthesia asking for him. "Where's the boy?" I could not answer him. I just squeezed his hand and told him to rest. That afternoon, while my husband slept, I received another message. "Sorry, Mom. I had an important meeting I couldn't cancel. Give Dad a hug for me. An important meeting. More important than seeing his father come out of heart surgery. More important than being with his mother during one of the hardest moments of her life." I justified it again. I told myself that this was how the work world was now. That young people had different pressures. That I was being old-fashioned and demanding. But deep down, something was beginning to crack. The third time was last Christmas. We had planned to meet at the house for dinner together. It was a tradition we had kept since Julian was a child. I would prepare the roast turkey, glazed ham, and apple pie. My husband would decorate the Christmas tree. It was our time of the year. The only time we truly felt like a family. Julian arrived 2 hours late. He did not bring a gift, not even a card. He sat at the table with his phone in his hand, checking messages every 2 minutes. He ate quickly, without talking much. When he finished, he stood up and said he had to go. Already? But you just got here, son. Yeah, Mom. I have plans with some friends. You know how it is. He left before 10 o'clock. My husband and I sat there in front of the dirty dishes, looking at the Christmas tree twinkling in the corner of the living room. That night I did not cry. I just stayed awake, wondering at what point I had lost my son. At what point had I stopped mattering to him? But the worst had not happened yet. The worst came 2 months later, when my husband had a relapse. His heart failed again. This time, there was no surgery that could save him. The doctors did what they could, but it was not enough. He passed away one morning in February, his hand squeezing mine, looking into my eyes as if he wanted to tell me something he never managed to say. I called Julian from the hospital, crying, shaking. I could barely speak. Son, your dad is gone. Come, please. I need you here. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Long, uncomfortable. Have you talked to the funeral home yet? That was his response. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I'm on my way. Not, I love you, Mom. Just a practical question. Cold. As if he were solving an administrative problem. He arrived at the wake late. He greeted a few relatives. He stood by the casket for 2 minutes. Then he went to a corner to check his phone. Throughout the entire service, during all those hours, I received condolences from people I barely knew. Julian was there, but he was not present. He was like a ghost, a shadow without substance. And now, 3 weeks after burying my husband, that same son had looked me in the eyes in the lawyer's office and laughed. He had laughed at my pain, at my loss, at my entire life reduced to an old car that barely worked. I got home that afternoon feeling a deep weariness in my bones. I sat in the living room where everything still smelled like my husband. His favorite armchair was still there. His coffee mug was still on the side table. His reading glasses rested next to the newspaper from the day he died. I opened my purse and took out the white envelope. I held it in my hands. It felt heavier than I remembered. Inside were the documents, the proof, the truth I had kept for so long, thinking I would never have to use it. But I could not stay silent any longer. I could not keep pretending everything was fine. My son had pushed me to the limit, and now, without wanting to, without knowing it, he had opened a door that could no longer be closed, because that envelope contained something Julian never imagined existed, something that was going to change everything he thought he knew about himself, about his father, about this family. And when he saw it, when he understood what had really happened all these years, his mocking laughter was going to freeze on his lips. I got up from the sofa and walked to my bedroom. I put the envelope in the top drawer of my dresser, under the underwear where no one ever looked. It was not time to show it yet. First, I needed to think. I needed to plan every step carefully, because what I was about to do had no turning back. My son thought I was weak, that I would disappear in silence, that I would accept the crumbs they had left me without saying a word. But he was wrong, because even though he had broken my heart, even though he had humiliated me, even though he had treated me as if I was worthless, I still had something he would never have. I had the truth. And the truth, when it finally comes to light, has a power that no inheritance can buy. I could not sleep that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the empty house. The clock in the living room marked each hour with its constant tick-tock. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Outside, the neighborhood dogs barked in the distance. Everything was the same. But I was no longer the same. Something had changed inside me in that office. Something had broken, yes, but something had also awakened. A part of me that had been asleep for years, decades, perhaps. A part that had learned to be quiet, to lower its head, to accept whatever came, just to keep the peace. But there was no peace left to keep. There was no family left to protect. There was only the truth. And me. I got up before dawn. I made coffee, like every morning. I sat at the kitchen table where I had eaten breakfast with my husband so many times. I still set out 2 cups out of habit. I still expected to hear his footsteps coming down the stairs. But there was only silence. I drank my coffee slowly, letting the heat burn my throat. I needed to feel something. I needed to know I was still alive, that I could still feel. Because after what I had lived through yesterday, part of me felt completely numb. When I finished, I washed the cups and went up to my room. I opened the dresser drawer and took out the white envelope. I placed it on the bed and sat in front of it, just looking at it, knowing what it contained, knowing what it meant. Inside that envelope were 3 documents. The first was a letter. A letter my husband had given me 6 months before he died. We were sitting on the back patio, eating ice cream in the shade of the avocado tree. He had been quiet all afternoon, thoughtful. Finally, he took an envelope out of his shirt pocket and handed it to me. "Save this, Helen. Do not open it now. Just keep it in a safe place. If things ever get difficult with Julian, if you ever feel he is treating you badly or not respecting you, open it. Everything you need to know is in there." I had looked at him, confused. "What are you talking about? What does Julian have to do with this?" My husband had sighed. "Just promise me you will keep it, and that if the time comes, you will use it." I promised him. But I never imagined that moment would come so soon. That 3 weeks after his death, my own son would humiliate me in that way. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. I took out the letter. The paper was yellowed. The ink was from a fountain pen. My husband's handwriting was unmistakable. I began to read. "Helen, my love, if you are reading this, it is because I am gone, and because Julian has hurt you. I am so sorry I did not have the courage to tell you this in life. I am sorry I was such a coward, but I need you to know the truth. Julian is not my biological son." The world stopped. I read that sentence 3 times, 4, 5, each time hoping the words would change, that they would say something different. But no, they kept saying the same thing. Julian is not my biological son. I continued reading, my heart pounding in my chest. "When we got married, you were already pregnant with another man's child. You never told me who he was, and I never asked. I only know that man abandoned you when he found out. He left you alone, scared, with no one. And I loved you so much that I did not care. I decided that baby would be mine, that I would raise him as my own son, that I would never, ever make him feel like he was different. And I kept that promise. Julian never knew. You never told him, and neither did I. To me, he was my son. I loved him as such. I gave him my last name. I gave him my time. I gave him everything I had. But as he grew, as he became a man, I started to see things in him that worried me. A coldness, a lack of empathy, a way of looking at people as if they were objects, as if the only thing that mattered was what he could get from them. I tried to correct him. I tried to teach him values, but it did not work. And over the years, that coldness turned into cruelty, especially toward you. I saw how he treated you, how he ignored you, how he spoke to you in that tone that broke my soul. And every time he did it, I wanted to scream the truth at him. I wanted to tell him he had no right to treat you that way, that you were his mother, that you had given him life, that you had sacrificed everything for him. But I kept quiet, out of cowardice, out of fear of breaking the family, out of fear that he would hate me. And now I regret it, because I know that after my death, he will be worse. I know he will try to take everything from you, that he will treat you as if you are worthless. And that is why I am leaving you this letter. And that is why I am also leaving you the proof. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the paper. I kept reading. In this envelope, you will also find the results of a DNA test I took 2 years ago. When Julian got pneumonia and needed detailed medical information, the doctor suggested we do genetic analysis. It confirmed what I already knew, that there is no biological match between him and me. That legally I am his father because I signed the birth certificate, but genetically we share no blood. I am also including a copy of the original will, the one I made 5 years ago. In that will, I left everything to you. The house, the accounts, everything. Because you were my wife. The woman I loved for over 30 years. The one who was with me through thick and thin. The one who deserved everything I had. But a year ago, Julian came to visit me. He was worried about my health. He told me we should review the will, that it would be easier if things were clear from the start. I was tired, weak, and he was very convincing. He talked to me about taxes, about legal procedures, about making things easier for you after my death. And I, like an idiot, changed the will. I left him the house. I left him the accounts, thinking he was going to take care of you, that he was going to make sure you had everything you needed. But now I know I was wrong. I know he was only thinking of himself. And that is why I am leaving you this proof, so you can defend yourself, so you can claim what is yours. Because even though I am gone, even though I can no longer protect you, I can still give you the weapons to protect yourself. I love you, Helen. I always loved you. And I am so sorry for failing you in this way. I am so sorry I was not stronger, braver, but I trust that you will be. I trust that you will use this when the time comes. And I trust that in the end, justice will be served. Yours always, until my last breath. The letter ended there. Signed with his full name, dated 6 months ago. 6 months that I had kept this envelope without opening it. 6 months that my husband had lived knowing that one day I would read this. That one day I would discover the truth. I let the letter fall and covered my face with my hands. I did not cry. I had no tears left. I just felt an enormous emptiness in my chest. An emptiness that was slowly filling with something new, something stronger than pain. Determination. I took the other 2 documents out of the envelope. The first was, indeed, a DNA test. Names, numbers, percentages, all there, all official. All sealed by a certified laboratory. The conclusion was clear. Probability of paternity, 0%. The second document was a copy of the original will, the one from 5 years ago. In clear print, my husband had left everything in my name. The house, the bank accounts, the savings, everything. With a note that read, "For my wife, Helen Anderson, who has been my faithful partner and the love of my life, may this be enough for her to live with dignity and peace for the rest of her days." I sat on the bed for hours, looking at those papers, slowly understanding what they meant, what they could do, the power they gave me. Julian knew nothing about this. He did not know that the man he had called Dad all his life was not his biological father. He did not know an earlier will existed. He did not know I had proof. Proof that everything he thought he knew about himself was a lie. And I had a decision to make. I could stay quiet, accept the old car, go live in a small apartment, let Julian keep everything, disappear in silence as he expected. Or I could stand up. I could use these documents. I could show him the truth. I could fight for what was mine, for what my husband had wanted me to have. I put the papers back in the envelope. I held it against my chest. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I had already made my decision. Julian had underestimated me. He had thought I was weak, that I was finished, that I had nothing left to give. But he was wrong, because I still had one thing left, the only thing that truly mattered in the end. I had the truth, and I was ready to use it. I spent the next 3 days locked in the house. I did not go out. I barely ate, I just thought, planned, tried to figure out how I was going to use the information I had. I could not just go to Julian and throw the documents in his face. That would be too easy, too fast, and he would find some way to twist the situation, to play the victim, to convince everyone that I was the bad guy. No, I needed to do this right. I needed to be sure of every step. On the 4th day, as I was sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee, the doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. I hesitated before opening it, but the doorbell rang again. Insistent. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. An older man was standing outside. He must have been in his 70s. He was wearing slacks and a white button-down shirt. He held a hat in his hands. His face was vaguely familiar, but I could not place him. I opened the door, just a crack. "Yes? Can I help you?" The man looked at me with tired eyes that had seen a lot. eyes that carried something heavy. "Mrs. Anderson, forgive me for coming like this, unannounced. My name is Arthur Miller. I do not know if you remember me. I worked with your husband many years ago, at the textile mill." I opened the door a little wider. Yes, the name sounded familiar. My husband had worked at that mill for almost 20 years before changing jobs. He had mentioned that name a few times. "Yes, I remember. My husband spoke of you." "What brings you here?" Arthur looked down. He seemed nervous, uncomfortable. "I heard about your husband's passing. I'm very sorry, ma'am. He was a good man, one of the best I ever knew, and that is why I am here. Because I owe him something. I owe him the truth, and I think you have the right to know it too." Something in his tone of voice sent a shiver down my spine. I opened the door completely and invited him in. "Please, come in." Arthur entered slowly. He sat on the living room sofa when I motioned. I sat across from him. I waited. My heart was beating fast, and I did not know why. "Mrs. Anderson," he began in a hoarse voice, "I know something about your son, Julian, something your husband told me many years ago. He made me promise I would never tell, that I would take it to the grave. But now that he is gone, and after what I heard happened at the will reading, I feel like you need to know." I leaned forward. "How did you know what happened at the will reading? How did you find out?" "Mr. Wallace's nephew works with me. He was in the office that day. He heard everything. He told me how your son treated you, how he mocked you, and I could not stay silent. Your husband would have wanted you to know the whole truth." I swallowed hard. The whole truth? There was more than what I already knew? Arthur took out a handkerchief and wiped his forehead. It was hot, but I think what was making him sweat was what he was about to say. "Your husband told me many years ago that Julian was not his biological son, that you had been with another man before you married, and that this man had left you when he found out about the pregnancy. Your husband decided to raise the boy as his own. He loved him as if he were his own blood. He told me this one night when we were having a few beers after work. He was worried because Julian was starting to show strange behaviors, coldness, lack of empathy, things that reminded him of someone." "Of whom?" I asked, my voice trembling. "His biological father." The silence filled the room. I could hear the wall clock ticking. I could hear my own breathing. Arthur continued. "Julian's biological father was named Vincent Russo. I knew him. He worked with us at the mill for a while. He was young, handsome, and a real piece of work. A smooth talker, a womanizer. He charmed all the girls, got what he wanted, and then disappeared. He did it to several women, not just you, Mrs. Anderson. He left a trail of broken hearts and fatherless children. Your husband knew. He saw the similarities in Julian as he got older. That coldness, that way of only thinking about himself. It scared him. It scared him to think that his son had that man's blood. I could not believe what I was hearing. I knew who Julian's father was, of course, but I never knew his name. I never knew he had worked with my husband. I never knew he had a reputation. I had met him at a dance. He told me his name was Claudio. He was charming. He made me feel special. And then he disappeared. I never knew his real name was Vincent. I never knew he had other victims." Arthur saw the shock on my face. "I am sorry, ma'am. I know this is hard to hear, but there is more. That man, Vincent Russo, did not just disappear. He is still around. He lives in the next county over, and I heard he is not doing well. He is sick, alone, and he has other children. Children he also abandoned. Children who, from what I hear, ended up just as cold and selfish as he is." I felt dizzy. This was too much. Too much information. Too much pain. "Why are you telling me this, Arthur? What does this have to do with the will?" "Because your husband, before he died, was investigating. He was looking for Vincent's other children. He wanted to see if there was a pattern, if that coldness was genetic. He found two, a son in Chicago and a daughter in Texas, both with legal problems, both with a history of manipulation and fraud. Your husband was terrified that Julian was heading down the same path. He told me, 'Arthur, if anything happens to me, I am afraid of what Julian will do to Helen. He only sees her as an obstacle, as a means to an end. And that is why I am here. Because he was right. Your son is just like his biological father, and you need to protect yourself. Your husband wanted you to be protected. I sat there, stunned. All the pieces were falling into place. Julian's coldness, his indifference, his cruelty. It was not just ambition. It was something deeper, something inherited. Arthur leaned forward. Your husband was a good man, Mrs. Anderson, the best. He loved you more than anything. He did not deserve this, and you do not deserve it either. Do not let your son do this to you. Do not let Vincent Russo win, even through his son. Fight back. He stood up, put his hat back on, and walked to the door. I've said my piece. I've kept my promise to your husband. What you do with this information is up to you. But know this, you are not alone. Your husband, even in death, is still looking out for you. He left. I sat in the living room for a long time, the white envelope in my lap, now joined by the new, terrible truth Arthur had given me. I now had my husband's letter. I had the DNA test. I had the original will. And now, I had a name. Vincent Russo. I had a pattern. I had a motive. Julian was not just greedy. He was desperate. And he was, perhaps, repeating a cycle he did not even know he was a part of. That night, I made a call. Not to Julian. Not to Mr. Wallace. I called a new lawyer. A lawyer Arthur had mentioned. A Mr. Grant. He's tough, Arthur had said. He does not play games. He is exactly what you need. Mr. Grant's office. A professional voice answered. Yes, I said, my own voice stronger than I expected. I need to make an appointment. My name is Helen Anderson, and I am ready to fight. The following morning, I was sitting in Mr. Grant's office. It was different from Mr. Wallace's. It was modern, sharp, all glass and steel. Mr. Grant was a man in his 50s, with a direct gaze and an air of confidence that was intimidating. I sat across from him, holding my purse tightly. Who told you about me? Arthur Miller. He called me yesterday. He told me your situation. And before him, your husband came to see me several months ago. He left me specific instructions in case you ever needed legal help. I felt a lump in my throat. My husband had planned everything. He had prepared every detail, knowing that one day I would need protection. Mr. Grant leaned forward. Tell me what happened at the will reading. I need to hear your version directly. I told him everything. From the moment we walked into Mr. Wallace's office, to Julian's mocking laughter, to the words he had said to me, to the old car my husband had left me. I told him how I felt, how something inside me had broken that day. Mr. Grant listened in silence. He took occasional notes. When I finished, he nodded. I understand. Now, show me what you brought. I took all the documents out of my purse and placed them on the desk, one by one. The letter, the DNA test, the original will, the information about Vincent Russo and his other children. Mr. Grant reviewed them carefully. He read every word, examined every seal, every signature. It took him almost 20 minutes. Finally, he looked up. This is solid, Mrs. Anderson. Very solid. We have several angles to work with. First, there is the original will, which clearly expresses your husband's initial wish to leave everything to you. Second, we have evidence that your husband changed that will under pressure or manipulation from Julian. And third, we have the DNA proof that shows Julian is not your husband's biological son. Does that change anything legally? It can change a lot. If we can prove that Julian knew he was not the biological son and still manipulated your husband to change the will, that is fraud. If we can prove he exerted undue influence on a sick and vulnerable man, that invalidates the more recent will. And if we can prove that your husband was on medication or in a state of mental confusion when he signed the new will, we can also challenge it. And can we prove it? Mr. Grant smiled faintly, a smile that did not reach his eyes but conveyed confidence. We can try. I'm going to need your husband's medical records from the last year. I need to talk to his doctor. I need to see all the bank movements. And I need you to tell me everything you remember about the day your husband changed the will. Any detail could be important. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing everything. I told him that my husband had been on strong pain medication, that some days he was confused, that Julian had started visiting more frequently right around those months, that I had overheard conversations about the will, but my husband told me not to worry, that everything was under control. Mr. Grant was constantly taking notes. I need you to do something for me, Mrs. Anderson. I need you to not say a word of this to Julian. Nothing. If he suspects we are preparing something, he will take precautions. He will hide evidence. He will prepare his own defense. We need this to be a complete surprise. How long will it take? 2 weeks. Maybe 3. I need to gather all the evidence. Talk to witnesses. Prepare the legal documents. And then we are going to request a court hearing to challenge the will. That is where we will present all of this. And if we lose, then your son gets everything, and you get the old car. But we are not going to lose, Mrs. Anderson. Not with this evidence. Not with this truth. I stood up to leave. I had taken the first step. I had set the wheels in motion. There was no turning back. Mr. Grant walked me to the door. One more thing, Mrs. Anderson. Your husband paid me in advance for my services. 6 months ago, he deposited $20,000 into my account with specific instructions to use that money to defend you if you ever needed it. So do not worry about the costs. Everything is covered. I felt the tears well up in my eyes. My husband, even in death, was still taking care of me, still protecting me. Thank you, I whispered. I left that office with a strange feeling in my chest. It was a mix of fear and hope, of pain and determination. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a purpose, a plan, a reason to get up each morning. Over the next few days, Mr. Grant worked quickly. He called me every other day to update me. He had gotten my husband's medical records. He had spoken with the doctor who treated him. He had reviewed the bank movements. Everything pointed to the same thing. My husband had been on strong medication when he changed the will, and Julian had been present at every visit to the bank, at every appointment with the notary, pressuring, insisting, manipulating. He had also contacted Vincent Russo's other children. 2 of them agreed to give testimonies if needed. They would talk about how their biological father had abandoned them, how he had ruined their lives, and how they saw similar patterns of behavior in other people with their same blood. Meanwhile, I kept silent. I said nothing to Julian. He called me once to tell me I had 2 weeks to get my things out of the house, that he had already spoken to a real estate agent, that he wanted to sell the property as soon as possible. All right, I said in a neutral voice. I am going to need a little more time, but I understand. I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded, how calm I felt, because I knew something he did not. I knew that time was on my side, that every day that passed brought me closer to justice. Finally, after 2 weeks and 4 days, Mr. Grant called me. Mrs. Anderson, we are ready. I have filed the challenge to the will with the judge. The hearing is scheduled for next Monday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Julian has already been notified. He will have to be there. And what do I do now? Now you prepare. You put on your best clothes. You arrive early. And you let me do the rest. You just have to be there. With dignity. With calm. Letting the truth speak for itself. I hung up the phone and sat in the empty living room. In the house that would soon stop being mine. Or perhaps would be mine again. It all depended on what happened on Monday. The weekend before the hearing was the longest of my life. The minutes dragged on like hours. The hours like days. I could not sleep. I barely ate. I just walked through the empty house, touching the walls, remembering every moment lived there. On Saturday morning, I received a call from Julian. His voice sounded irritated, annoyed. What is this about a court hearing, Mom? What are you trying to pull? I prepared myself mentally before answering. I kept my voice calm. Serene. I am just exercising my legal rights, son. Nothing more. Your rights? The will is clear. Everything is mine. Dad decided that. Why can't you just accept it and move on? Because it is not fair, Julian. And I believe your father was not in a condition to make that decision when he made it. There was a silence. Then his voice changed. It became harder, more threatening. You are making a mistake, Mom. A very big mistake. You are going to lose. You are going to look ridiculous. And you are going to waste money you do not have on lawyers. For what? To prove what? That you are a bitter old woman who cannot accept reality? His words hurt me. Of course they hurt. But they did not break me like before. Because now I had something he did not. I had the truth. And the truth made me stronger. We'll see on Monday, Julian. In court. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but my heart was firm. On Sunday, I went to church. I had not been in months. Since before my husband died, I sat in one of the pews at the back, where no one would see me, where I could be alone with my thoughts and with God. I did not pray for revenge. I did not pray for Julian to suffer. I just prayed for strength, for clarity, for justice to be done, for the truth to come to light, and for me to have the courage to face whatever came. When I left the church, I felt lighter, more prepared, as if I were finally ready for what I had to do. That night, I prepared my clothes for Monday. I chose a simple gray dress, nothing flashy, nothing extravagant, just something dignified, something that said I was a serious woman, a respectable woman, a woman who deserved to be heard. I also prepared all the documents again. I reviewed them one by one. My husband's letter, the DNA test, the original will, the medical records. Everything had to be in order. Everything had to be perfect. I went to bed early, but I could not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house, the creaking of the wood, the wind hitting the windows, the memories whispering in every corner. I thought about my husband, how he had loved me, how he had protected me even after death. I thought about Julian when he was a child, about his laugh, his hugs, how he would run to me when he came home from school. And I wondered at what point he had turned into this cold man who treated me as if I was worthless. At 5 a.m, I got up. There was no point in trying to sleep anymore. I made coffee. I sat in the kitchen, watching the sunrise through the window. The first rays of sun painted the sky orange and pink. It was beautiful. And for a moment, just for a moment, I allowed myself to feel peace. At 8, I showered. I got dressed carefully. I combed my hair. I put on a little makeup. Not much. Just enough to not look sick, to not look defeated. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a different woman. I was not the same one who had walked into that office 3 weeks ago. I was not the same one who had listened to her son's mocking laughter without saying anything. This was someone new, someone stronger, someone who was ready to fight. At 9:15, a taxi picked me up. Mr. Grant had told me he would meet me at the courthouse, that I should not worry about anything. The ride was short, but it felt eternal. I looked out the window, watching the familiar streets pass by, the bakery where I bought sweet bread on Sundays, the pharmacy where my husband picked up his medications, the park where Julian played when he was a child. My whole life was in these streets, and now it all hung by a thread. We arrived at the courthouse at 9:30. It was a large, gray, concrete building. There were people coming and going, lawyers with briefcases, nervous families, security guards checking bags. I paid the driver and got out. My legs felt weak, but I kept walking, one step at a time, breathing deeply, reminding myself why I was there, why this was important. Mr. Grant was waiting for me at the entrance. He was wearing a dark suit. He carried a leather briefcase. When he saw me, he smiled and walked toward me. "Mrs. Anderson, you are very punctual. That is good. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I admitted. "But ready. Perfect. That is exactly what I need to hear. Now, listen to me carefully. When we go into that courtroom, you are going to see Julian. He will be sitting on the other side with his lawyer. Do not look at him. Do not react to anything he says. Just stay calm. I am going to do all the heavy lifting. You just need to be present. Understood?" I nodded. Understood. "You are also going to hear difficult things. Things about your husband, about you, about your past. Julian's lawyer is going to try to make you look bad, to question you, to make you doubt. Do not let him. Remember why you are here. Remember you have the truth on your side. I will remember. Good. Then let's go. We entered the courthouse. We went through the metal detector. We went up to the second floor. We walked down a long hallway with doors on either side. Finally, we arrived at courtroom number 3. Mr. Grant opened the door. Inside, there were several rows of chairs, a large desk at the front where the judge would sit, and on the right side, already seated, was Julian. My son looked at me when I entered. His eyes were full of anger, of contempt, but also something else. Something I had not seen before. There was fear, just a little, but it was there. I sat on the left side with Mr. Grant. I placed my purse on my lap. I took a deep breath, and I waited. At 10 o'clock sharp, the judge entered. He was a man in his 60s, gray-haired, with glasses, a serious expression. Good morning. We are here for the hearing to challenge the will of Mr. Anderson. Are both parties present? Both lawyers responded yes. Very well. Let us begin. The moment had arrived. There was no turning back. All that was left was to trust in the truth, and that justice would finally come. Mr. Grant stood up first. He walked to the center of the room with confident steps. His voice was clear, professional, but firm. Your Honor, I am here to represent Mrs. Helen Anderson in challenging the will of her late husband. We have compelling evidence that the current will was executed under undue influence at a time when Mr. Anderson was not in full command of his mental faculties due to strong medication and his deteriorating health. Julian's lawyer stood up immediately. He was a young man in a sharp black suit with an arrogant voice. Objection, Your Honor. The will was signed before a notary. It has all the necessary signatures. It is completely legal and valid. Mrs. Anderson is simply unhappy with her husband's decisions and is trying to reverse them out of resentment. The judge raised his hand for silence. You will both have a chance to present your arguments. Mr. Grant, continue. Mr. Grant nodded and began to present the evidence. First, my husband's medical records. He read aloud the doses of morphine he was taking, the pain medications, the medical reports that indicated occasional mental confusion, disorientation, memory problems. As you can see, Your Honor, Mr. Anderson was not in a condition to make significant financial decisions during the last months of his life. And yet, during that period, his son Julian convinced him to change a will that had been in effect for 5 years. Then he presented the original will, the document that left everything in my name. The judge reviewed it carefully. He read every line, every word. This will was made when Mr. Everydadiozen Anderson was completely healthy, when he had mental clarity, and in it, he expressed his wish to leave everything to his wife, the house, the savings, everything, with a specific note saying she deserved to live with dignity for the rest of her days. Julian's lawyer stood up again. People have the right to change their minds, Your Honor. Perhaps Mr. Anderson reconsidered and decided his son deserved more. That is not illegal. But Mr. Grant already had his response ready. He took out another document, one I had not seen before. Your Honor, this is a sworn affidavit from Arthur Miller, a close friend of Mr. Anderson. In it, he recounts a conversation he had with Mr. Anderson 2 months before his death. In that conversation, Mr. Anderson expressed regret for changing the will. He stated, and I quote, that his son had pressured him, that he had felt forced, that he wanted to fix it but no longer had the strength. The courtroom fell silent. I looked at Julian. The color had drained from his face. His hands were gripping the edge of the table. The judge asked to see the affidavit. He read it slowly. Then he looked at Mr. Grant. Do you have more evidence? Yes, Your Honor. I have something else. Something that completely changes the context of this case. Mr. Grant turned to me. He signaled to me. It was time. I stood up, my legs trembling. I walked to the front. Mr. Grant gently took my arm to guide me. I stood in front of the judge, in front of Julian, in front of everyone. Mrs. Anderson is going to testify about information her husband left for her before he died, information that her son is unaware of, and that is fundamental to understanding why this will must be annulled. The judge nodded. Mrs. Anderson, please proceed. I took a deep breath. I looked Julian directly in the eyes, and I began to speak. My husband left me a letter before he died. In that letter, he told me something I already knew, but that I had never told anyone else. Julian is not my husband's biological son. The impact of those words was immediate. Julian shot to his feet. His lawyer tried to calm him, but he was not listening. "What are you saying? That is a lie. You are a liar." The judge slammed his gavel. "Order! Mr. Anderson, sit down, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." Julian sat down, but he was still trembling with rage. His eyes stared at me with a hatred I had never seen before. I continued. My voice was no longer shaking. "When I met my husband, I was already pregnant by another man, a man who abandoned me when he found out. My husband decided to raise him as his own son. He loved him. He gave him his last name. He never treated him differently. But 2 years ago, when Julian began to change, when he began to treat me with contempt, my husband took a DNA test. He wanted to confirm what he already knew, and the results were clear. There is no biological link. Mr. Grant took the DNA test and handed it to the judge. The judge examined it. He verified the seals, the signatures, the dates. This test is legitimate, Your Honor. It was performed by a certified laboratory, and it proves that Julian Anderson has no legal right to inherit as a biological child. Legally, Mr. Anderson could have disinherited him completely if he had wanted to, but he did not, because he loved him, because despite everything, he considered him his son. Julian's lawyer was pale. He stood up with difficulty. This is irrelevant. My client was legally recognized as his son. He has the last name. He has the birth certificate. Biology does not matter here." But Mr. Grant shook his head. "Biology matters when it comes to manipulation, when it comes to undue influence. Because my client also has evidence that Julian knew or suspected he was not the biological son, and that he used that information to pressure his father on his deathbed, to make him feel guilty, to convince him to change the will." "That is a lie," Julian shouted. "I did not know any of this." Then Mr. Grant pulled out another document. This was an excerpt from text messages between Julian and a friend from a year ago. "Read this, Your Honor." In these messages, Julian tells a friend, and I quote, "That old man is not really my father anyway. I am just waiting for him to check out so I can collect what he owes me for all these years." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The only sound was Julian's ragged breathing. The judge read the messages. His expression hardened. He looked at Julian with severity. "How did you get these messages?" Julian's lawyer asked, desperate. "Legally. The phone he used to send those messages was the property of Mr. Anderson. It was registered in his name. And after his death, his wife has the legal right to access those records." I looked at Julian. All his arrogance was gone. All his confidence had evaporated. Now he was just a man exposed, naked before the truth. The judge closed the folder with the documents. He took off his glasses. He looked at all of us. "I have heard enough. I am going to take a 30-minute recess to review all the evidence presented. Then I will give my verdict." He stood up and left the room. We all sat in silence. Julian finally looked at me. There was no more anger in his eyes, only shock, confusion, and something that might have been pain. "Why? Why did you never tell me?" he whispered. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of compassion for him. But it was too late. Far too late. Because it did not matter who your biological father was. What mattered was who raised you, who loved you, and you threw that love away as if it was worthless. He did not answer. He just looked down. The 30 minutes passed like an eternity. Finally, the judge returned. We all stood up. "I have reviewed all the evidence," he began in a firm voice, "and my decision is clear. The current will is hereby nullified, having been executed under undue influence and while the testator was in a vulnerable state. The original will shall be reinstated, wherein all assets are left to Mrs. Helen Anderson." The judge's words echoed in the room like thunder. I felt my legs weaken. Mr. Grant put his hand on my shoulder to steady me. I had won. After so much pain, so much humiliation, so much injustice, I had finally won. I looked at Julian. He was motionless in his chair. His lawyer was whispering in his ear, but he did not seem to be listening. He just stared into space, as if he could not process what had just happened, as if his entire world had collapsed in a matter of minutes. The judge continued. Furthermore, I order Mr. Patient, Julian Anderson, to vacate the property within a period not to exceed 15 days. The house legally belongs to Mrs. Anderson, and he has no right to remain there. If he does not comply voluntarily, a forced eviction will proceed. Julian's head snapped up. His voice came out broken. 15 days? Where am I supposed to go? The judge looked at him without emotion. That is not the concern of this court. You should have thought of those consequences before you manipulated your sick father. This hearing is concluded. He slammed the gavel one last time. He stood up and left the room. The bailiffs approached to signal that we should leave. Mr. Grant turned to me with a genuine smile. We did it, Mrs. Anderson. The house is yours. The savings are yours. Everything is yours, as it should have been from the beginning. I could not answer. The tears finally began to fall. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of liberation, of justice finally served. We left the courtroom. In the hallway, Julian caught up with me. His lawyer had already left. He was alone. Defeated. Mom? Wait. I stopped. I turned to look at him. For a moment, I saw the boy he had been. The boy who ran to me after school. The boy who hugged me when he was scared. But that boy was gone. Maybe he had never really existed. What do you want, Julian? He swallowed hard. He seemed to be searching for the right words. I did not know Dad was that sick. I did not know the medication had him so confused. I just thought. You thought what? That you could take advantage of a dying man? That you could take everything from your mother without consequences? That is not it. I needed the money. I have debts. A lot of debts. The business is failing. I'm about to go bankrupt. I thought if I had the house, if I had the savings, I could save myself. So the truth came out. It had not just been cruelty. It had been desperation, selfishness, cowardice. But it was too late for explanations. You could have asked me for help, Julian. You could have been honest with me. But instead, you chose to humiliate me. You chose to laugh at me. You chose to treat me like I was worthless. He looked down. I'm sorry. Those 2 words. So small, so insufficient. I'm sorry too, son. I'm sorry things came to this. I'm sorry you were not the man your father hoped you would be. I'm sorry the love we gave you was not enough to make you a better person. I turned around and walked toward the exit. Julian did not follow me. He just stood there, in the middle of the hallway, watching me walk away. The following days were strange. I returned to my house, knowing it was now completely mine, that no one could take it from me, that I finally had what my husband had wanted me to have. Julian complied with the judge's order. Within 2 weeks, he had moved all his things out. He did not come to say goodbye. He just sent some friends with a truck to pick up his belongings. I stayed in my bedroom while they worked. I did not want to see him. I did not want another confrontation. I had had enough. When they left, I walked through the whole house. It was empty of his presence. But it was still full of memories, good memories, of when he was a child, of when we were a family, of when there was still love within these walls. I decided to make changes. Not big ones, just small ones. I painted the living room a lighter color. I changed the curtains. I moved the furniture. I wanted the house to feel new, to feel like a beginning and not an end. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I found an old box. Inside were pictures of Julian as a baby, pictures of my husband holding him, smiling, looking at him with so much love it hurt to see it now. I sat on the dusty attic floor and looked at those photos for hours. I cried. I cried for the son I could have had, for the man my husband was, who was gone, for everything that had been lost. But I also felt something else. I felt peace. Because I had done the right thing. I had defended my dignity. I had fought for justice, and I had won. That night, I received a call from Arthur Miller. Mrs. Anderson, I heard the news. I am so happy for you. Your husband would be proud. Thank you, Arthur. For everything. For coming that day. For giving me the information I needed. For helping me find the strength to fight. You do not have to thank me. I just did what your husband would have asked me to do. Take care of you. We hung up, and I stared at the phone. I thought about all the people who had helped me. Arthur. Mr. Grant. My husband, who even after death had planned my protection. I was not alone. I had never really been alone. The months passed. The house became a home again. I started inviting friends over for coffee. I started cooking again. I started tending to the garden I had neglected for so long. And a strange thing happened. I started to feel young again. Not physically. My 60 years were still there. My knees still ached. My back still complained. But inside, something had been rejuvenated. Something had been reborn. One day, while watering the plants in the garden, I saw a neighbor pass by with her granddaughter. The girl must have been about 5 years old. She was running ahead of her grandmother, laughing, chasing butterflies. The grandmother waved at me. I waved back. And for a moment, I felt a pang, a question. Would I ever see Julian again? Would there ever be a reconciliation? I did not know. Maybe. Maybe not. But it was no longer up to me. I had done my part. I had set boundaries. I had demanded respect. Now it was up to him to decide if he wanted to try to repair what he had broken. That night, I sat in my husband's armchair, the one he had used for years. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I could almost feel his presence, almost hear his voice. You did well, Helen. I'm proud of you. I smiled. Alone in the empty living room, I smiled because I was finally okay. I was finally at peace. I had finally gotten back not just my house and my savings, but something much more valuable. I had gotten back my dignity, my voice, my strength. I had gotten back myself. It has been 6 months since that hearing. 6 months since the judge spoke those words that changed my life. 6 months since I got back what was mine. And every day that passes, I feel a little stronger, a little more whole. The house does not feel empty anymore. I filled it with life again. I adopted a cat. A small orange cat I found on the street one rainy afternoon. I named her Hope, because that is what she gave me. Hope that I can still care, that I can still love, that I still have so much to give. My friends come to visit on Tuesdays. We drink coffee on the patio. We share stories. We laugh. We cry sometimes. We all have our battles. We have all lost something. But we are also all still here. Still standing. Still fighting. One of them asked me recently if I ever think about forgiving Julian. If I ever consider calling him. Trying to fix things. I think about it every day, I told her honestly. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It does not mean allowing him to hurt me again. It means letting go of the resentment so I can live in peace. And I have already done that. I have let go of the anger. I have let go of the pain. But that does not mean I have to open my door again. She nodded. She understood. They all understood. The truth is, I have not heard anything from Julian since he left. I do not know where he lives. I do not know how he is. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks of me, if he regrets it, if he learned anything from all this. But those questions do not keep me up at night anymore. They do not consume me. I have learned that I cannot control other people's decisions, not even my own son's. I can only control mine. And I chose dignity. I chose the truth. I chose to defend myself. Mr. Grant came to visit me a month ago. He brought the final papers. Everything was officially in my name. The house, the bank accounts, the $120,000 my husband and I had saved for decades. It was all legally mine. No doubts. No pending appeals. What are you going to do with all this? He asked me as we drank tea in the living room. I thought for a moment before answering. I am going to live. I am going to travel a little. I want to see the ocean. I have never seen the ocean. My husband always promised to take me, but we never had time. Now I am going to go. I am going to stand in front of the ocean and breathe in that salty air. I am going to feel the sand under my feet. I am going to do everything I always postponed. He smiled. I am happy for you, Mrs. Anderson. You deserve it. After he left, I kept thinking about those words. I deserve it. How many times in my life had I thought the opposite? How many times had I settled for less? How many times had I believed I was not worth enough? But now I know differently. I know I am worthy. I always was. And no one has the right to make me feel otherwise. Yesterday, while I was cooking, the doorbell rang. My heart leaped. For a second, I thought it might be Julian, that he had finally come to talk, to apologize, to try to repair what he had broken. But it was not him. It was a young woman. She looked to be about 30. She was holding a baby in her arms. "Mrs. Anderson?" she asked nervously. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" She swallowed hard. She seemed to be gathering her courage. "My name is Sarah. Sarah Russo. I'm Julian's sister. Vincent Russo's daughter." The world stopped. One of Julian's sisters. One of the children Vincent had abandoned. She was here, on my doorstep. "Please, come in." We sat in the living room. I made tea. The baby slept in her arms. She told me her story. How her father had abandoned her when she was 2. How her mother had struggled alone to raise her. How she had looked for her siblings when she grew up. How she had found Julian a few months ago. He told me what happened. About the hearing. About the inheritance. Everything. "And I wanted to come and tell you something, Mrs. Anderson." "What is that?" "That you did the right thing. My father ruined many lives. And I see that same darkness in some of my siblings, that same coldness. But you did not let that destroy you. You did not let Julian get away with it. And that gives me hope. Hope that we can break those patterns. That we do not have to be like our father." Her words filled me with an emotion I did not expect. I took her hand. "You already broke that pattern. You are here, with your baby, building your own life. That is the bravest thing you can do." She smiled, tears in her eyes. We talked for hours. She told me about her life, her dreams, her fears. And I told her my story. Not just the painful part, the beautiful part too. The good years with my husband, the happy moments with Julian when he was a child. Everything. When she left, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming. For reminding me that there is always hope. There is always a chance to be better." That night, I went to bed thinking about everything I had lived through. About the long road I had traveled. From that afternoon in the lawyer's office when my son laughed at me, to today. From humiliation to dignity. From silence to a voice. And I understood something important. This story was never about revenge. It was never about taking something from Julian. It was about reclaiming myself. About remembering who I was before they convinced me I was worthless. About finding the strength that was always there, just waiting for the right moment to awaken. My husband gave me the tools. Arthur gave me the information. Mr. Grant gave me the representation. But I was the one who fought. I was the one who stood up. I was the one who decided not to accept the crumbs. And that, more than the house, more than the money, more than any legal victory, is what really matters. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see a different woman. I see someone who survived, who fought, who won. Not perfect, not without scars, but standing, strong, dignified. And if I could say something to the women who are going through the same thing, to those who feel they do not matter anymore, to those who believe they must settle for what they are given, I would tell them this: do not stay silent. Do not accept injustice just to keep the peace. Do not believe them when they tell you that you are worthless. Because you are worthy. You have always been worthy. And the truth, when you finally decide to tell it, has a power that no lie can defeat. Tomorrow, I am going to go buy my tickets. I am going to the ocean, as I promised. I am going to stand in front of the ocean, and I am going to scream. I am going to scream everything I kept silent for years. And then, I am going to laugh. I am going to feel the wind on my face and remember that I am alive, that I still have time, that my story is not over. It is just beginning. And you, who are reading this, you, who perhaps feel invisible. You, who think it is too late to defend yourself. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like they tried to erase you from your own story? Like they treated you as if you did not matter? As if your years of sacrifice were worth nothing? If so, I want you to know that you are not alone, that your voice matters, that your dignity matters, and that it is never, ever too late to reclaim what is yours. It is never too late to become who you were always meant to be.